High above the sweltering rot-green canopy of the New Guinea jungle, the air is thin and freezing. Down below, the world is a chaotic mess of mud, malaria, and close-quarters death. But up here, at 25,000 feet, the war's a duel of physics and cold blood. A lone predator scans the horizon. He's flying a machine that looks like a creature from a science fiction pulp novel, a twin-tailed, twin-engine monster of polished aluminum. The pilot inside is not a screaming warrior. He doesn't curse. He doesn't yell. He breathes slowly. His heart rate is resting. Below him, Japanese fighter pilots in their legendary Zeros are clawing for altitude, desperate to intercept American bombers. These are the samurai of the sky, veterans of the China War, men who have never known defeat. They scan the clouds, looking for the enemy, but they see nothing. They have no idea they are already dead. They are being stalked by a ghost. This ghost wasn't a hardened killer trained in the fighting pits of the finest military academies. He was a quiet, unassuming farm boy from Poplar, Wisconsin. A kid who grew up shooting deer in the silent winter woods. A kid who wrote letters to his mom and worried about his laundry. And yet, by the time the smoke cleared and the war ended, this quiet boy would achieve 40 confirmed aerial victories. A record of aerial lethality that has never been broken by any American pilot since. How did the most unassuming pilot in the United States Army Air Forces become its deadliest instrument of war? This is not just a story about a pilot. This is the story of the man they couldn't kill, the record they can't break, and the brutal truth of what it took to become America's ace of aces. To understand the Predator, you must first understand the environment that forged him. Richard Bong was born into the silence of the American Midwest. Poplar, Wisconsin, is a place where the winters are long, the work is hard, and patience isn't just a virtue, it's a survival skill. As he wrote in a letter home, "Dear Mom, the woods were quiet today. Didn't see much, but the tracks are fresh. You have to wait. If you move too fast, you lose them. It's all about the waiting." Young Dick Bong was a hunter, but not a trophy hunter. He was a sustenance hunter. In the woods, he learned the fundamental laws of ballistics and biology. He learned that a target moving through trees requires deflection. You don't shoot where the deer is. You shoot where the deer's going to be. You calculate wind, distance, and speed in a fraction of a second. You don't spray bullets. You take one shot. You make it count. While Bong was honing his marksmanship on white-tailed deer, the world was catching fire. In Europe, the Nazi war machine was crushing nations with a new kind of warfare, blitzkrieg. In the Pacific, the Empire of Japan was executing a campaign of brutal conquest, their navy and air force seemingly invincible. By 1941, America was still a sleeping giant, hesitant to enter the fray, but the winds of war were blowing across the ocean, carrying the scent of smoke. Bong, like so many of his generation, felt the call. But for him, it wasn't about politics. It wasn't even really about patriotism yet. It was about the sky. He enlisted in the Army Air Corps Aviation Cadet Program. He was driven by a simple, profound love of flight. From the moment he stepped into the cockpit of a primary trainer, a Stearman biplane, his instructor saw it. One instructor noted, "Most cadets, they fight the airplane. They wrestle the stick. They are constantly correcting, constantly overthinking. Bong was different. He didn't fly the airplane. He wore it. It was like the wings were bolted to his shoulders. He could feel the air over the ailerons before the plane even reacted. The boy was a natural. He didn't just fly. He merged with the machine. But with this raw, prodigal talent came a dangerous edge, a restlessness, a boredom with the rules. Stationed at Hamilton Field in California, Second Lieutenant Bong was introduced to the machine that would define his life, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. The P-38 was unlike anything the world had ever seen. While other fighters were single-engine, compact machines, the Lightning was a twin-boom giant. It was heavy, it was fast, and it was heavily armed. It was the most advanced and perhaps the most lethal fighter in the American arsenal. Bong fell in love, and that love nearly destroyed his career before it ever began. Official reports sanitized, and filed away in dusty archives, document a series of unauthorized aerobatic displays. But the reality was far more reckless. Richard Bong treated the skies over San Francisco as his personal playground. He flew his P-38 down Market Street so low that pedestrians could see the rivets on the wings. He blew the laundry off of clotheslines in the suburbs. And then, the piece de resistance. He looped the Golden Gate Bridge. It was a flagrant, breathtaking violation of every rule in the book. He was showing off, yes, but he was also testing the limits, his own and the aircraft's. He needed to know what the machine could do when pushed to the breaking point. His commanding officer was General George Kenney. Kenney was a man who had no time for hotshots. He was a stern, brilliant tactician, responsible for the entire 5th Air Force. When Bong was brought before him, the young pilot expected to be court-martialed. He expected to be grounded for good. He stood at attention, the silence in the room deafening. General Kenney told him, "Lieutenant Bong, you're the most undisciplined pilot I have ever seen. You have endangered civilians. You have risked a $100,000 aircraft. You should be in the brig." But Kenney saw something else in the young pilot's eyes. It wasn't arrogance. It was confidence, an absolute, unshakable mastery of his machine. Kenney saw what the flight instructor saw, a prodigy. Kenney, one of the most perceptive commanders of the war, made a decision that would change the course of history in the Pacific. Instead of ruining the boy's career, he would forge him into a weapon. "I'm not going to ground you, Bong," Kenney said. "I'm going to send you to the place where you can do the most damage. But first, you're going to go to the woman's house whose laundry you blew off the line, and you're going to wash her clothes. Then, I'm sending you to New Guinea." Kenney kept Bong under his direct command. He assigned him more training, honed that raw energy, and then he unleashed him. September 1942, New Guinea. This was the bleeding edge of the war. A brutal, unforgiving battlefield where American forces were desperately trying to halt the Japanese juggernaut. It was a war of attrition fought in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. If the Japanese didn't kill you, the jungle would. Pilots battled heat exhaustion in the cockpit. Mechanics fought fungus that grew in the fuel lines. And looming over it all was the specter of the enemy. The Japanese pilots Richard Bong would face were not rookies. They were battle-hardened veterans, masters of their craft, who had been fighting since 1937. They flew the Mitsubishi Ace-XM-0, a fighter so agile, so legendary, it could outmaneuver almost anything the Allies put in the sky. On paper, a farm boy from Wisconsin with a handful of flight hours stood no chance. If he tried to dogfight a Zero, if he tried to turn with it, he would die. The Zero could turn on a dime. The heavy American fighters were like bricks in comparison. But Bong wasn't flying just any plane. He was flying the Lightning. Designed by the legendary Clarence Kelly Johnson at Lockheed, the P-38 was a monster. Its twin-boom design, powered by 2 roaring Allison engines, gave it incredible speed and an astonishing rate of climb. But the P-38 had a secret weapon, a design choice that fit Richard Bong's hunter mentality perfectly. In almost every other fighter of the war, the P-51 Mustang, the Spitfire, the Hellcat, the machine guns were mounted in the wings. This created a problem called convergence. The bullets from the left wing and the right wing had to be angled to meet at a specific point in front of the plane, usually 300 yards. With wing-mounted guns, if you fired at a target too close, the bullets would pass on either side. If you fired too far away, they would cross and spread out. You had to be at the exact right distance to get a kill. The P-38 was different. All its weapons, 4.50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon, were clustered in the nose, directly in front of the pilot. This meant there was no convergence. The P-38 shot a straight, concentrated buzzsaw of lead and high explosives that traveled in a perfect line out to infinity. If a pilot could get a target in his sights for even a fraction of a second, at any distance, the result was utter annihilation. But the Lightning had a dark side. It was a killer of its own pilots. The plane was notoriously difficult to master. Its advanced turbo superchargers were temperamental. In a high-speed dive, it suffered from a terrifying phenomenon called compressibility. As the plane approached the speed of sound, shock waves would form on the wings. The air would stop flowing over the tail. The control stick would freeze solid. The pilot would pull with all his strength, but the plane would keep diving, straight into the ground. Dozens of American pilots had already died, just learning to tame the beast. Bong respected the danger, but he also understood the potential. In his first combat missions over Buna, New Guinea, he didn't rush in. He watched. He learned. He calculated. He saw the Zeros dance through the sky, twisting and turning, baiting Americans into the slow-speed traps where the Zero was king. An American pilot who tried to turn with a Zero often died in a matter of seconds. Richard Bong made a decision. He would not turn. He invented a new game. His doctrine was brutally simple, a 4-step algorithm for survival and victory. Step 1. Use the P-38's powerful engines to climb above the enemy. Always hold the altitude advantage. Altitude is insurance, he would say. Step 2. Convert that altitude into speed. Dive on the target in a screaming high-speed pass. Step 3. Unleash the devastating firepower of the nose-mounted guns in a single, precise, controlled burst. Step 4. Use the momentum to zoom. Climb back to the safety of high altitude. Never stick around. Never turn. Hit and run. It was a vertical war, not a horizontal one. While the Japanese were fighting in 2 dimensions, Bong was fighting in 3. His combat reports were a reflection of his personality, understated, clinical, and brutally efficient. He noted altitude, engagement conditions, and the outcome. What the reports didn't capture was the genius at work. Other pilots would spray long, hopeful bursts of ammunition, praying for a hit. Bong was different, as Major Thomas Lynch described. Bong, he flew like a surgeon. He was patient. He'd wait and wait, stalking the enemy formation like a cat. And then, bam, one burst. He didn't waste lead. His ammunition efficiency was off the charts. He was firing where the plane was going to be. It was the Wisconsin woods all over again. The deflection shot. His victory count began to climb. 1 kill. Then 2 on a single mission. A bomber here, a 0 there. He became a phantom-like presence in the sky, appearing from the sun, striking with lethal precision, and vanishing back into the blue. The Japanese, analyzing their losses, started noting a pattern. Vicious, high-speed attacks from above by a twin-tailed devil. They gave the P-38 a chilling nickname, the Fork-tailed Devil, and Richard Bong was its most terrifying practitioner. On the nose of his P-38, he painted a picture. Not a pin-up girl, not a skull, not a shark mouth. He painted the face of his sweetheart back home, Marge Vattendahl. Marge became a legendary sight in the Pacific skies. To the enemy, it was a symbol of death. To the bomber crews he escorted, that smiling face was a symbol of hope. July 1943, above the port of Lae, New Guinea. The air is thick with smoke and fear. A massive formation of Japanese bombers, escorted by a swarm of Zero fighters, thunders toward Allied positions. For the soldiers huddled in their foxholes, it looks like an unstoppable wave of destruction. But high above, in the blinding sun, Bong and his squadron are waiting. This engagement would become a textbook example of Bong's evolving genius. He was no longer just a lone wolf, he was a conductor of aerial violence. Instead of diving in head first, he held his flight group at a superior altitude, forcing the Japanese to look up into the glare. He waited for the exact moment a bomber exposed its belly. Then, he gave the order. The P-38s fell from the sky like silver sharks. Bong led the charge. He ignored the fighters. He went straight for the bombers, the heart of the enemy formation. A single, precise burst from his nose cannon, and a Mitsubishi bomber simply disintegrated in a blossom of fire and black smoke. He didn't linger to watch it fall. He was already climbing, converting his speed back into precious altitude, scanning for his next victim. By November 1943, Richard Bong had 21 confirmed victories. This wasn't just an impressive number, it was historic. He was now one of America's top aces, a celebrity in a war that desperately needed heroes. General Kenny, ever the shrewd commander, knew the value of a symbol. He decorated Bong with a Distinguished Service Cross. And then he did something Bong hated. He sent him home. Bong was ordered back to the United States for a war bond tour. Suddenly, the quiet pilot who let his flying do the talking was thrust into the spotlight. He was paraded before cheering crowds. His face was plastered on newspapers from New York to California. But Bong was miserable. He wrote to Marge, "I feel like a fraud, Marge. Everyone is clapping, but the guys are still over there. Lynch is still there. The squadron is fighting, and I'm here shaking hands. I need to go back. I have to go back." He relentlessly petitioned General Kenny, practically begging to be sent back to combat. Finally, Kenny relented. By March 1944, Bong was back in New Guinea, and a surprise was waiting for him. A new, upgraded P-38J Lightning. This was a refined killing machine. It boasted improved engines, better heating for high-altitude flight, and most importantly, hydraulically boosted ailerons. This innovation gave the P-38 far better maneuverability at high speeds. It solved the heaviness of the controls. In Bong's hands, the P-38J was not just a fighter, it was a scalpel. He returned to a different war. The years of brutal attrition had taken their toll on the Japanese air forces. Many of the veteran samurai were gone, dead in the Solomons or the Coral Sea. They were replaced by young men with limited training. For an American ace like Bong, now with hundreds of hours of combat experience, the fight had become an execution. His tactical approach evolved again. He perfected the head-on attack. Most pilots would break off early in a head-on pass, terrified of a mid-air collision. Bong held his course. He locked eyes with the enemy. He fired until the last possible second. The closing speed was over 800 miles per hour. The window for a kill was less than a second. Bong's gun camera footage shows him repeatedly flying directly through the debris of his victims. By June 1944, the inevitable happened. During a mission over New Guinea, Bong shot down his 27th and 28th enemy aircraft. In doing so, he surpassed the legendary Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 kills. Richard Ira Bong was now officially America's greatest fighter ace. General Kenny was both proud and terrified. He immediately prohibited Bong from flying routine combat missions, declaring him too valuable to risk. "You're a national treasure now, Dick," Kenny told him. "We can't lose you." Bong was furious. He argued that his place was in the sky, leading his men. A compromise was reached. Kenny allowed him to fly, but only on high-priority missions, and only as a flight leader to direct the battle, not to seek kills. But for Richard Bong, self-defense was a loose term. October 1944. Balikpapan, Borneo. A critical mission to escort B-24 bombers striking Japanese oil refineries. The Japanese threw everything they had at the American formation in a desperate attempt to protect their fuel supply. The sky erupted. Bong, leading his P-38s, positioned his formation with the sun at their backs. He led the initial attack, diving and blasting a fighter out of the sky. But as he pulled up, disaster struck. His own aircraft was rocked by a violent explosion. An enemy fighter had gotten on his tail. Cannon shells ripped through his right engine. Warning lights flashed across his console. The engine sputtered, caught fire, and died. Most pilots would have disengaged immediately, diving for home on a single engine. That was the smart thing to do. That was the sane thing to do. But Richard Bong was neither smart nor sane in that moment. He was a predator. He feathered the dead propeller to reduce drag, hit the fire extinguisher, and calmly assessed the situation. He was still flying. His gun still worked. And there were still enemies in the sky. With his P-38 crippled, trailing smoke, and flying on one engine, he banked the heavy fighter back into the dogfight. He hunted down another Japanese fighter. He maneuvered a broken plane against a healthy one, and he shot it down. Only then did he turn for home, nursing his battered plane across hundreds of miles of open ocean. When he landed, the ground crews were horrified. His P-38 was riddled with bullet holes. An entire engine was destroyed. They declared the aircraft combat ineffective, scrap metal. but they underestimated the bond between the pilot and his machine. Bong oversaw the repairs himself, and within weeks he was flying Marge once again. This single incident cemented his legend. He wasn't just skilled, he was fearless. He wasn't just an ace, he was unbreakable. After that day, his victory tally climbed relentlessly toward a number no one had ever thought possible. 35, 36, 38. By December 1944, he had 40 confirmed aerial victories. The number was staggering. It was an achievement so far beyond the norm that it barely seemed real. Back in the United States, at the highest levels of command, a decision was made. General Douglas MacArthur himself issued the order. It was no longer a request. Richard Bong was to be permanently grounded. His war was over. He was simply too valuable a symbol to lose. He was awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest award for valor. The citation spoke of his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity. Bong stood there, characteristically quiet, looking almost uncomfortable in his decorated uniform. He married Marge Vattendahl in February 1945. For a brief moment, the deadliest ace in American history was just a husband, a young man hoping to build a life far away from the scream of diving aircraft. But the warrior couldn't stay away from the cockpit. As 1945 dawned, the world of aviation was on the cusp of a revolution. Piston engines were becoming obsolete. A new, terrifyingly powerful technology was emerging, the jet engine. At Lockheed's facility in Burbank, California, Kelly Johnson, the father of the P-38, had created America's first operational jet fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star. It was the future, a sleek machine that produced 4,000 pounds of thrust, pushing speeds over 500 miles per hour. The Army needed its best pilots to tame this new beast. Richard Bong was assigned to the test program. He was transitioning from the pinnacle of one generation of technology to the very beginning of the next. August 6, 1945. A hot, clear summer day in Burbank. For Major Richard Bong, it was a routine day. He was scheduled to perform a standard acceptance flight on a new P-80. He suited up. He kissed Marge goodbye in his mind. He climbed into the cockpit. He taxied onto the runway. He pushed the throttle forward. The jet accelerated, pinning him to his seat. It lifted gracefully into the California sky, but just moments after takeoff, the primary fuel pump failed. The engine flamed out. Below him, the suburbs of Los Angeles stretched to the horizon. He was at a critically low altitude with no power. Bong fought for control. He tried the emergency restart. Nothing. He tried to glide toward an open field, but the P-80, without its engine, fell like a stone. In the final seconds, he made a choice. He tried to bail out to save the people on the ground from an uncontrolled crash, but he was too low. The P-80 slammed into the ground and exploded. Major Richard Bong, the ace of aces, was killed instantly. He was 24 years old. On the exact same day, half a world away, an American B-29 bomber named the Enola Gay flew over the city of Hiroshima. It released a single weapon. In a blinding flash of light, the world changed forever. The news of Richard Bong's death, the death of America's greatest individual warrior, was buried beneath the headlines, announcing the dawn of the atomic age. In a profound and tragic irony, the master of conventional aerial warfare died on the very day that his type of war was rendered obsolete. The era of the gunslinging ace, the jewel of nights in the sky, was over. It was replaced by the cold, impersonal math of nuclear destruction. 80 years later, Richard Bong's record of 40 confirmed victories remains unbroken. Modern air combat is a sterile affair of radar screens and missiles fired from miles away. We will likely never again see the close-quarters dogfights that defined World War II. His record stands not just as a number, but as a monument. A monument to a time when a quiet farm boy could climb into a machine, and through sheer talent, discipline, and courage, become a legend. General Kenny later wrote that Bong was the greatest fighter pilot he had ever witnessed. He noted that Bong's success came not from aggression, but from its polar opposite, a calm, calculated precision. He was the ghost of the Pacific, the man they couldn't kill in combat, the record they can't break, and the farm boy who just wanted to fly. To truly understand the Bong doctrine, we have to look at the physics. The Zero had a low wing loading. It was light and had big wings. This meant it could turn tight circles. The P-38 had a high wing loading. It was heavy. If Bong turned, the Zero would cut inside his turner radius and shoot him down in less than 2 loops. So Bong used the boom and zoom. He would dive from 20,000 feet. At that speed, the Zero's controls stiffened up. The Japanese pilot couldn't roll fast enough to dodge. Bong would fire and then pull up into a steep climb. Gravity would slow him down, but his momentum carried him back up to safety. The Zero, with its weaker engine, would stall if it tried to follow him up. It was a masterful use of potential and kinetic energy. Bong wasn't just fighting a pilot. He was fighting gravity, and he made gravity his ally.